Hi guys, welcome back to the Little Craft House. If you caught my tutorial last week, you would have seen that I did a colour mix tutorial inspired by the colours of Halloween. Today I thought we would use those colours to make some coordinating Halloween earrings. Halloween isn't really something that I celebrate personally. However, I do love a good excuse to make a themed pair of earrings. So let's jump straight into it and let's get started creating. Okay, so these were the colours that we created last week. Some of them are a little similar to each other, so we're going to use them in two different ways. Now, obviously you don't have to use the custom colours that I made. You may have packeted colours that are very similar. If you're watching this tutorial and it is nowhere near Halloween, you can still apply these techniques with other colour mixes. I'm just doing it Halloween themed because it is currently the beginning of October and yes, it's coming up soon. So I made a slightly larger batch of this one here, which is the Galaxy Glitter dupe, and that is going to be our base for our first slab that we're going to do. I'm going to move some of these similar colours to the side as I'm going to use these for some coordinating pieces afterwards. They are very similar to these two, so I'm just going to take these ones away and we're going to work with these ones to start with. So I decided recently that I'm just going to call this technique a clay pizza because I'm literally just, it's pretty much the same technique as what I do when I make a pizza for dinner. I am just chucking on all of the pieces. So I've rolled my clay sort of thin, not too thick. It's actually doubled over, so it doesn't really matter. I'm just going to throw these randomly on. I'm going to do a little bit of each colour. Now this is one of the simplest techniques that you can do with polymer clay. It creates some great results, and you obviously can use up any colour mixes you've got. You can use up scraps, you can use anything. And by not pressing them down as I go along, it means it gives me the ability to move them afterwards into better positionings if I'm not happy with how they're sitting. Okay, so I'm fairly happy with how this is all positioned. I'm going to get a piece of baking paper and pop it down over the top. This is going to sort of hold all these pieces in place as I move the roller over it. It's not going to stick to the roller. So just going to give it a little smudge down. Adding a light bit of pressure until it squashes. And the benefit of the baking paper is it's a little bit translucent there, so you can actually see what's happening on the underneath. Right, that's looking fairly good. I might just give it, looks like some of it's still a little bit risen, so what I'll do is just move these pieces out of the way and give it another roll just to now bring it down as an even sheet. Excellent. Okay, so I can now leave this as is, or I can add some detail, which I'm going to do. So I've got my little ball tipped tool here. See how it's got the little bally part on the end of the tip, and I'm just going to gently pop some little dots into each of the green pieces. right, and that's looking so good so far. I'm going to grab my bit of baking paper back and just pop that onto it, and we're just going to pop that over to the side so we can work on our next bit. Now, to make this truly a Halloween theme, we're going to add some little ghosts onto the top. So I'm just going to roll some clay onto my tile in the hope that it will stick to the tile, because I'm going to use a little cutter, and I'm hoping that the clay doesn't get stuck in the cutter. Now, you could use Halloween shapes if you have some Halloween shaped cutters. I don't have anything that's small enough, so I'm going to use a little cutter hack that I shared last Halloween, and that is to use a little love heart cutter. So I'll show you what I'm going to do. I'm going to grab my scalpel knife, and I am now going to cut each one of these love hearts in half from the center down. You may have seen me just do this before. Okay, you may have seen me use my flexi blade just before. When I stick my clay to the tile, I use the flexi blade to bend and scrape up those pieces. Now, with each one of these, we're going to turn these into the little ghost. So I just need to reshape them slightly so it's not such a blunt, straight cut here. I need to turn it more into a little teardrop. So I'm just going to reshape it slightly. Give it a little bendy tail. And I'm going to do that with each one of these. Now, I think they need some cute little faces as well, so I'm just going to roll out some black clay into a really long little snaky shape here. And I'm just going to use my knife again just to cut some little round bits off of here and make into some eyes. So I'll grab my little slab back here, and then we can start placing the little ghosts on. And at the moment, I'm not going to push these down into position until I've done our second slab. And then when we go to cut these out, I may need to move them to make them more visible in the pieces that I'm going to cut. So I'm just going to leave them like that loosely on there for now and pop this back onto that bit of baking paper and put it to the side so that it's out of our way while we do our next part. So I've got back all my original colours that we started with, excluding the other dark one because we used that as the base of that first slab. And what we're going to do is a stripe as a coordinating piece to the ghosty slab. So we're going to do a stripe using rectangles today. So there's quite a few different ways that you can create a stripe. or striped components, and today we're going to do it using a cutter. So what we're going to do, I've rolled them all quite thin because I want just a really thin stripe. I'm going to cut out as many rectangles as I can using these colours. Okay, we're going to start layering these pieces up now, making sure that there is all the nice straight pieces at the front all together. And I'm just going to smooth each one down, making sure that there's no air bubbles caught. And I'm doing a layer of the dark between each layer of colour. Something to be aware of using these colours too is that a couple of these colours have glitter mixed through them. So when we do go and slice our stripe, we may create a slight bit of drag from those glitter pieces because a knife obviously won't slice the glitter in half, but what it will do is just push it down. So it means that we won't get crisp colours without glitter between the glittery ones, if that makes sense. But it actually doesn't bother me. I will be happy with it being all glittery and not just contained to those glitter colours. I'm just going to take my clear tile and just apply a bit of pressure just to make sure that I did get out any air bubbles that were in that. And I've started with the dark and ended with a colour because that way if I'm stacking them on top of each other as we layer it, it will continue to follow the pattern. Now I am going to switch blades to my rigid blade, which isn't as bendy. This is going to give me a nice straighter cut as I cut the pieces out of this. So I'm just going to go straight down. The first one is generally a wasted piece because it just evens it up. But that's our stripe. And now I'm just going to cut some even pieces out of this, probably only a couple of millimeters thick along. And I am just eyeballing this, so it's not going to be perfect. So I've decided that I'm going to layer my stripes onto a base piece of clay. It just helps to keep the stripy slab stronger because it has a firm base rather than just these tiled pieces. So I am now just going to tile them all on. Probably should have trimmed down those edge pieces too so that they're blunt straight edges that could go against each other instead of being a little bit jagged as they are there, but they seem to be slotting in nicely together, so I am just going to leave it as is, and that will also cut down on my wastage as well. I'm going to use the last piece just to fill in those gaps. I am going to grab that first slice back. Even though it's a little bit uneven on the back, I'm going to just cut it in half just to fill that top line there, because I can't leave it as being uneven like that. So yeah, I'll just use this piece for that. Because I tried to keep these slices not too thick, I don't have to roll them down too far, but I am just going to give a quick little roll over to try and make those join marks disappear. Now, as I mentioned before, this isn't going to be a perfect stripe, but I didn't want it to be perfect. I like it to be a little bit imperfect, a little bit, I don't know if the word's rustic, a little bit irregular. Just trim off those extras. Okay, so we now have our two coordinating slabs, and now it is time to cut out some pieces. So I'm going to, as I mentioned before, I've left these little ghosts quite lightly on there, so that I can move them around if I need to. I don't necessarily, I could just place them on afterwards, but I think I do want to cut some so that they're not all full ghosts. I think I do want some to be just partial. So I'm going to work out how I'm going to cut this. I'm going to do some coordinating pieces with the stripe as well, and I'll just try and avoid any of those join lines or bits that it goes too wibbly wobbly. So I think in the end, I ended up repositioning every single one of those little ghosts. So really, I should have just left them off the slab, cut my pieces, and then placed them on. Something to remember when positioning the ghosts or the shapes that I'm cutting out as well is that when I'm drilling holes. So I actually did make a slight mistake in one of them, and I placed a ghost too close to the edge, and I had to drill through him, which means that that piece was a bit thicker than the rest of the shapes. So I was lucky enough that the jump ring was able to go through, but sometimes that's not always the case. If my base clay wasn't as thin as what it was, it could have been an issue. I found I had this cute little ghost cutter in my stash, so I decided that we're going to make some little ghosts as well using the cutter. And as usual, I will try and make sure that I cut as many toppers and studs out of this clay as possible. Studs always come in handy to have, and it just helps to use up the pretty patterns that are on this clay as well. And if you are interested in finding out other ways that you can use up these bits of clay scraps, come back for next week's tutorial, because I'm going to have a tutorial all about using up your clay scraps, and it will include these ones here. Okay, so I have all my little pieces here. I'm just going to do a quick little lay them out so that once they're baked I know how I'm thinking of assembling them. And in just a moment I'm going to pop them into the oven and get them all baked up. Once these ones are baked, I'm going to put some little eyes on them, so I'm going to draw them on to little ghosty eyes. So those are my pieces so far. Okay, so they are all baked up. I'm using my pen to do the little ghost face, and I found some little witches hats from another project, so I'm going to add them to those little ghosts to make them all cute. I've also drilled my holes. I did forget to sand them, but that's okay because I'm going to go back and do them after they're assembled. It's going to be more difficult, but I'll manage. That was my mistake. I realised probably as I was joining those little dangly bits on that I hadn't sanded them, and they're going to be the most difficult to go around. But anyway, they are all assembled nicely. I'll need to glue some earring backs on the tops of those witches' hats and on a couple of the other circles. These ones have got the hooks, and I've got some ball studs on the ones at the top there as well, so they won't need earring backs glued on. But once that's all done, I can card them up, and I've got a couple of markets coming up, so I might take them there with me. I hope you have enjoyed watching today's tutorial, and hopefully you've grabbed some inspiration for using those custom colours that we designed last week. So thank you for joining me, guys, and I will see you again soon. Bye.